Ethan Graves had everything: private jets, glass towers, and a face on every magazine. He built an empire from nothing, turning tech into gold and ambition into legacy. People bowed when he entered, feared when he spoke, and envied when he disappeared. But despite all the noise, he felt an emptiness that echoed louder each year. One morning, stuck in traffic, he glanced out the window and froze. There, on a cracked sidewalk, was a woman painting with her fingers, bare hands, no brushes. She had no shoes, just colors and eyes full of fire. He couldn't look away. She painted suns on concrete and flowers over gum stains. People passed her like she was invisible, but Ethan saw a universe in her strokes. He rolled down the window as her hand moved in rhythm, raw and intentional. Her name was Kala, she said without even looking up. "This is how I eat. Don't get in the way." He offered her money, and she laughed in his face. "I'm not your charity case, rich boy." He smiled, for the first time in weeks. That night, he couldn't stop thinking about her. The image of her colors stayed with him, more vivid than any painting in his mansion. He returned the next day in jeans and a hoodie, trying not to look like himself. Kala glanced up, rolled her eyes, and kept painting. "You really came back?" she muttered. "I wanted to see how it ends," he replied, nodding to the painting. She smirked, wiping paint on her pants. "This kind of art never ends. It survives." Ethan started visiting her every afternoon. He brought sandwiches she rarely accepted and silence she often appreciated. She talked about color like it was a language, and he listened like it was scripture. One day, he asked why she painted here, of all places. "Because rich men never look down," she said. He flinched, but stayed quiet. Kala wasn't trying to impress or inspire. She was just trying to stay alive with dignity. The boardroom began to feel suffocating. Stock charts lost their thrill. Even champagne on rooftops tasted flat. All Ethan wanted was the sidewalk, the laughter, the raw truth, the girl who made the world brighter one stroke at a time. He began sketching at home, badly. Kala critiqued him ruthlessly, which only made him try harder. "Money never taught you how to fail," she said one day. "Art will." Paparazzi caught them walking together. The headlines mocked her clothes and called her the sidewalk siren. Ethan's advisors begged him to stay away. "This isn't good for the company," they warned. But he didn't care. He met her again the next day, this time sitting beside her with paint on his hands. Cameras flashed, but his eyes stayed on her. "You're ruining your image," she teased. "Good," he said. "It never fit me anyway." He invited her to his penthouse once. She looked around, unimpressed. "This place is cold," she said. "It's worth 20 million, he replied. "Then you overpaid," she smirked, curling up on his hardwood floor to nap. He brought her blankets, but she pushed them away. "I don't need comfort. I need truth." And just like that, she became the only real thing in his world. She let him into her world, one broken sidewalk at a time. He watched her give crayons to homeless kids and create murals from trash. Every corner she painted became sacred. "Why do you help them?" he asked once. "Because I was them," she answered. He never asked again. Instead, he donated quietly, under false names, in places where she painted. But she knew. She always knew. Kala became the face of a movement she never asked for. Viral videos showed her painting in storms, feeding kids, refusing luxury. Offers came, galleries, deals, fame. She turned every one of them down. "I paint for people who walk, not those who collect." Ethan stood behind her always, never above. He gave her space to grow, and she gave him a reason to stay grounded. And somehow, that balance became love. Ethan's empire demanded his return. $1 billion deal, a merger that would double his wealth. He looked at the contract, then at her sleeping on a park bench beneath her mural. She stirred slightly, paint on her fingers, peace on her face. He sat beside her, leaning against the wall she made beautiful. He pulled out his phone, opened the contract, and pressed delete. The media exploded when Ethan stepped down from his company. Speculation ran wild. Burnout, scandal, secret illness. He gave no explanation, only a statement. Sometimes, meaning matters more than money. Kala watched the coverage with a sigh, smearing yellow onto a dull sidewalk. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "I wanted to," he replied. He wasn't chasing headlines anymore. He was chasing her heartbeat. And that lived beneath the streets. Their days became simple and sacred. Coffee from street vendors, paint-stained fingers, sunrises from the curb. He bought a van and turned it into a mobile art supply center. She painted its sides with wild flowers and fists breaking chains. Kids lined up with broken brushes and tired eyes. She taught them to create, not escape. He fixed the van, carried boxes, and listened. Every moment felt more alive than his years in suits. One night, it rained hard and washed away one of Cala's murals. She stared at the wall in silence, hands limp at her sides. Ethan tried to comfort her, but she shook her head. Everything I paint disappears eventually. He took her hand gently. Then let's make something that stays. She looked up, her eyes shimmering through the storm. Only if it's made together. They rented a tiny studio behind a grocery store. It smelled like old coffee and dust, but she called it perfect. The walls became their diary, layered with colors, fights, and love. He painted her laugh in orange and her fury in red. She painted his past in black, then layered hope over it in green. They were messy, flawed, and real. For the first time, Ethan felt seen without a suit, and Cala finally felt safe without hiding. Ethan's old world didn't vanish, it waited. Former partners offered him quiet buybacks and new deals. Friends invited him to charity galas, hoping for donations. He attended one, once. Dressed in street clothes, he felt like a ghost in his former life. Cala didn't go. She was repainting the van that day. He left the event early, traded his champagne for a brush. And he never looked back. Cala's murals began telling their story. A man leaving a throne for a woman with painted palms. A city turned canvas. A sidewalk that bloomed under their feet. People stopped to ask questions, to listen, to cry. She didn't need museums. She had walls that talked back. He didn't need investors. He had purpose. And in the cracks of the city, they built something permanent. They fought sometimes. About space, money, exhaustion. But the fights were human, not hollow. And they always ended in paint. On walls, on skin, on laughter. Once, she screamed, "You're trying to fix me." He replied, "No, I'm trying to stay beside you, broken or not." She cried in his arms that night, not because she was weak, but because no one had ever stayed before. One morning, Cala woke to find Ethan gone. Panic gripped her heart, but then she saw a note. "Don't worry. I'll be back before you miss me. Trust me." She waited all day, heartbeat restless. When he returned, he carried a rolled canvas. On it, he'd painted her sidewalk mural, replicated stroke by stroke. "For when the rain comes again," he said. She didn't speak. She just kissed him. They started hosting workshops in neighborhoods no one cared about. She taught art. He taught courage. He never said her name in interviews, but her work always spoke for both of them. Their story became legend, whispered in alleyways and shouted in murals. People said, "That girl painted hope," and the man who had it all walked away for her. But they didn't want credit. They just wanted color to keep spreading, and love to keep growing. On the anniversary of their first meeting, she took him to a new wall. It was blank, wide, waiting. She handed him the brush first. "I followed you into your world," she whispered. "Now paint with me in mine." Together, they filled it with fireflies, dreams, and a city reborn. It wasn't just art. It was their vow. Years passed, but the fire never faded. Their studio expanded into a network of small art hubs across the city. Each was built in forgotten neighborhoods, filled with murals, children, and hope. Cala still painted on sidewalks, never stopped. "Concrete listens better than walls," she joked. Ethan stayed close, covered in paint, running logistics with love. The man who once ruled skyscrapers now managed brushes and budgets. And he had never felt more powerful. One day, a major art foundation offered to exhibit her work in Paris. The money was life-changing. The attention, massive. But Cala hesitated. "I don't want my soul in a frame," she told Ethan. He didn't pressure her. He only asked, "What does your heart want?" She thought long and hard, then declined. "I'd rather paint a sidewalk in silence than hang in a museum that forgets me." He kissed her hands, stained in blue. The city honored them without permission. A street was renamed after her. A child she once taught became the youngest muralist in town. Graffiti artists started tagging her initials beside their pieces out of respect. Ethan's former investors now donated anonymously to her projects. The empire he left behind had slowly transformed under her influence. It didn't belong to corporations anymore. It belonged to the people. They never married in a church or signed any paper. Instead, they held hands on a rainy night, standing where they first met. She dipped her fingers in paint and pressed them to his chest. He did the same, leaving a smudge above her heart. "No vows," she whispered. "No need," he replied. And in that moment, they were more married than most. Bound by color, not contracts. A documentary crew begged to tell their story. At first, Calla refused. But when she saw the young crew, kids who grew up on her murals, she said yes. They followed her quietly for weeks, capturing truth, not spectacle. Ethan said little on camera, but his eyes said everything. When the film aired, people cried across the world. A billionaire's redemption, a painter's rise, a love stitched in sidewalk cracks, and none of it scripted. One morning, Calla woke with aching hands. Years of painting without rest had taken their toll. Doctors warned her to slow down. She laughed, shook her head, and painted one-handed. Ethan built her a wall in their studio. Lower, softer, closer. "I'll carry the weight when you can't," he said. "You already have," she whispered. And the wall filled with light. They started mentoring young couples, artists and builders, dreamers and planners. They never preached, only listened. Calla taught that art isn't always pretty. Sometimes it bleeds. Ethan taught that love isn't rescue. It's staying, even when it rains. Their legacy was written not in gold, but in fingerprints. Sidewalks they once slept near now carried their initials. The city no longer looked down on them. It looked up. One evening, as the sun set over their favorite mural, Calla rested her head on his shoulder. "You never asked me why I kept painting the same flower," she said. "I figured it was your favorite," Ethan replied. "No," she smiled. "It's a weed. It grows where no one wants it. But it refuses to die." He kissed her temple gently. "Like you." And in that moment, he knew she had saved him. When Calla passed, the city dimmed for a day. No official decree, just a silence that spread through the streets. People left flowers near her murals. Kids wrote poems on the walls she once touched. Ethan didn't hold a funeral. He held a painting day. Thousands came, brushes in hand, ready to color the streets. Because that's what she would have wanted, more color, less grief. Years later, Ethan still walked the sidewalk where they met. Her name was etched into every stone, every wall, every heart. He never rebuilt the empire. He built something greater, belonging. Her last painting remained untouched, protected by the city itself. Beneath it, he wrote a single line. "She didn't change my life. She gave it meaning." He sat beside the mural, brush in hand, and whispered, "Still painting, Calla. Still yours."